We're leaving Killarney and heading south to Kinsale, which is a much smaller town, and it gives you more of a feeling of a typical Irish quaint village. Located on the shores of the ocean, it was an important harbor town for the city of Cork, which is just about 20 miles north of Kinsale. Kinsale, as you see, has these charming old historic buildings that have been renovated and nicely preserved. It has a history of Viking occupation and Spanish occupation. Cromwell's forces invaded back in the 1650s, and throughout it all, it's maintained its own sense of independence and created its own character and culture in this town of Kinsale. One of the things it's most noted for are the delicious restaurants. There's a series of gourmet restaurants here that are not terribly expensive by gourmet standards, and there's a lot of bed and breakfasts and small hotels that you can stay at. Cottage Loft was one of our favorites. This is gourmet dining at its finest. When the evening comes in at Kinsale, one of the great sports is just strolling about, window shopping from restaurant to restaurant and trying to make up your mind. It's that old game of looking at the menu posted in the window, checking out the ambience and interior decor, and also looking at the crowd. This is an important point. You want to see if there's a nice crowd in there. You don't want to go into an empty restaurant or a very crowded restaurant unless it's something extraordinary, but a place like the Cottage Loft will do you just fine. And wake up the next morning at your bed and breakfast for another big meal.
Well, this is your Irish breakfast, which is bacon, egg, sausage. These are traditional puddings, a black pudding and a white pudding. They are traditional to Ireland. And this is a potato waffle with some mushroom and tomato, of course.
And
this is the Irish bread, the Irish soda bread, which is traditionally Irish. You don't get it in any other country. And these are homemade jams. These are some homemade jams with black currant from the garden down below, and rhubarb and ginger, which we also grow ourselves. And this is an Irish mustard with whiskey, and I don't know, and Irish honey.
Properly fortified, we head on to the next destination of our travels through the south of Ireland, the city of Cork, or as the locals call it, Cork. It's the second largest city in Ireland, population of nearly 200,000. It's quite an important market and trading center. The architecture is a mix of Victorian Gothic and Georgian and typical 19th century Irish, some modern buildings tossed in. It's not a real important destination area for the tourist, quite frankly, but it does have a nice downtown and very friendly people. Good place for shopping. We happened to be in town because our car was getting fixed. Always take out insurance on your car when you rent a car in rural countries like Ireland. You might want to repair the damage that flying pebbles do to your windshield and other such things. This takes us to Cork, but we don't stay long, just to stop for lunch and walk around town, have a look at the shops, and then we're on our way again. We're heading north to the town of Cahir for a look at their famous medieval castle. There's several other castles in the neighborhood, particularly Blarney, that's the most famous of the castles near Cork. But Cahir Castle is quite spectacular. It's about the largest of all the castles in Ireland, has a beautiful moat that still surrounds it. The battlements and the walls are very well preserved from its ancient days when it was a true fighting center. And the guide gives us a little history of the castle.
Now, the Normans were notorious for making use of natural strong points, and here not only had they the river Suir, but they also had this naturally occurring rock, which you can see on all sides of the walls. Now, this rock was important to the castle because it prevented two means of attack. Number one, it prevented undermining, and number two, it prevented use of the battering ram against the walls. Now, this natural strong point was a good beginning. We're only talking about the situation of the castle up to this. But then the Normans wanted to fortify it even more. So the first line of defence they built themselves was actually this Barbican wall. Now this protected the entrance to the castle because in the 13th century, in order to get into the castle, you cross the wooden bridge over the river shore from what is today the car park out here over to this wall. Now if you look along this wall today, you'll still see the holes which represent where the defenders would have shot their arrows onto the attackers making their way onto the wooden bridge. From this Barbican area we moved to the next line of defence, which was the Outer Courtyard, as in the 15th century. Now this courtyard was very important in both peace and war times, because in peace times we actually had all the people necessary for the upkeep of the castle would have been housed along this wall to the left. Also down here in this we have the castle cottage, which was built in the 1840s, and it's here today as we show a film on historical sites in the area. And then this grassed area in the centre would have been used by the castle for its animals, so all the animals would have been housed in small little houses along this area. But this castle, as I said, was built predominantly for defence. So to turn our attention then to the defences in this courtyard, first of all, at the southern end we have two round towers known as flankers. Now because these project outwards from the castle, they command excellent views of the outlying areas, and sentries would have been posted here at all times to give advance warning of the oncoming attackers. And because they are round towers, there are no blind spots, so they can see perfectly well all the outlying areas. Now the two towers are 15th century in origin, but the conical roofs belong to the restorations of the 1840s. And then to come up to this wall on the left, we have a postern gate known as a sallyport, coming from the French word saillir, meaning to gush forth. Now this is the only exit to the back of the castle, and would have been used by the defenders to launch a counter-attack on the enemy camped outside. The idea here was to allow the enemy to camp around this area at night. When they were camped and asleep, the enemy would actually sneak out through this door, launch an attack on the enemy, killing as many as possible, and then being able to return to the castle to defend it. Now this wall here is a 16th century wall, and it's actually built for defensive purposes, because cut out in the depth of the wall here we have mural staircases which gave the defenders protection against the attackers, over which the attackers had to go in order to take the castle.
Was there some actual real battles that took place in the area?
There was indeed. Now we don't know, we only know about the attempts using artillery. We don't know about the efforts before that, but there would have been, certainly there would have been battles before 1599. That's the first recorded one we have. But there would certainly have been right up, because it was at a time the Normans were notorious for making battle on people. It was part of their life. If they weren't battling, they weren't happy.
Well, first of all, the castle has two different dates, 13th century and 15th century. This part here, like the banquet hall here, is 13th century. The outer courtyard is 15th century. It was a butler family that lived here, the same butlers as Kilkenny, the same butlers as Waterford. And they were a massive family that owned the vast majority of Tipperary, Waterford and Kilkenny. Now the castle was actually attacked two times. It was attacked by Cromwell in 1650, of course, and it was attacked by the Earl of Essex. Now you must remember that these castles were built to protect against musket holes, muskets, bow and arrows, etc., etc. They weren't built to protect against cannons. And when the era of the cannon came, unfortunately, a castle like this became obsolete. So it was, when Cromwell came, Cromwell had cannons. Cromwell didn't even have to attack the castle. From a town nearby called Clonmel, what he did was he sent a letter. You can find the letter in the London Museum. He sent a letter and said, all right, if you don't get out, I'll knock the castle. So fortunately, the Butler family left. Cromwell took the castle for 12 years and then went back to the Butlers. The last Butler died in 1961. The last direct descendant of the Cahir family died in 1961. In 1964, the castle went to the state.
So it was a Norman castle?
Yeah, it was an Anglo-Norman. The Butler family are Anglo-Norman. They're from Normandy in France. And then in 1375, it was given to the Butler family. The policy of the Crown basically at that time would be, rather than sending over soldiers himself to try and take Ireland, he'd give it to loyal Irish families, give them land, give them, etc., etc., these incentives. They would look after the lands. He kind of got into Ireland by the back door, if you like. So it was given to the Butler family, the Earls of Ormond.
I see. Okay. Well, that's a good history. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.